Places and spaces that has been to mean so much to me. Keep on changing me. Places and spaces that I plan to see will be a part of me. Soon, everywhere I go, the things I see change what I know. Question what I believe. There's so much to explore.
History is a lie agreed upon, words echoed by one of history's greatest pirates, Napoleon Bonaparte. However, his lie has rung true in the realms of time, for the remnants of colonialism stand to this day with masses oblivious to how the West was won. Another pirate worthy of mentioning is Winston Churchill, who said, "History will be kind to us, for I intend to write it." See, when colonialists overthrow cultures, they still adopt the culture and the history as their own. And when you study Whitey's version of his story, it is critical for the reader to know beforehand everything you read isn't necessarily truth. Unfortunately, the school system we've all come through is one of the strongest mechanisms responsible for hiding truths about history. We should have known that the first time they told us George Washington never told a lie. One of the biggest lies that's been told for over a century is the legacy of ancient Kemet. Ancient Kemet has erroneously been called Egypt, long since Hollywood's box office tall tale Cleopatra back in 1963. It's been said that this is the flick that changed Hollywood, probably because Whitey now saw how they could do better than rewriting the books. They could now tell their lies visually. It should not surprise you when you hear that when the Persians, Greeks, and then the Romans came into Africa, along with the murder and plagiarism, they helped themselves to the wealth and monumental structures of the Nile Valley. Our story's been stolen, edited, and served back to us complete with salt, white rice, and white bread, and because of this daily diet, we've grown to accept our ancestors and Kemet as multicultural, while at the same time become more oblivious to an important fact. Where are the black people at? It's simple. They're doing what Napoleon and Churchill said. Yo, Whitey's done such an effective job on us. They not only erase the historical significance to these artifacts, which is blatantly African in origin, they've been able to hide our story by putting it right in front of our eyes. Centuries ago, there were mad Tekenu that stretched skyward along the Nile, standing in pairs in front of temples, with the Tekken on the left representing the female principle, also depicting yesterday or the past, and the one on the right symbolizing the male principle, as well as tomorrow or the future, and last, the space in between meaning today or the present. Today, less than half a dozen remain standing in Kemet or Egypt. The Romans brought Tekenu home as trophies of a conquered land, and today there's more standing in Rome, 13, than in all of Kemet. The urge to adorn modern cities with ancient Tekenu continued into the 19th century. The last to depart Kemet were taken from Alexandria to London and New York in the late 1870s. Whitey has shown their fondness of our ancestors by stealing these monuments, housing them in museums, shipping them around the world in exhibits, as well as erecting them in major cities, all the while making a sizable profit, which you know Whitey's kept. In New York City's Central Park, right next to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, stands an ancient Kemetic monument that's been called Cleopatra's Needle. None of these Tekenu have anything to do with Cleopatra, for her death was over 20 years after they were transported and reassembled in Alexandria. The Greeks called Tekenu obeliskos or obelisk, but when we look up the definition, it means meat cleaver. This is a prime example of how Whitey stole and renamed our culture, making it hard to find its true meaning. By changing the original name of the Tekenu, they changed the history, enabling Whitey to fool the world into believing it was them who were the first civilizations. The correct name is Tekken, and it means to bring into balance. A pair you would call Tekkenu. The story of the Assyrian drama was synonymous with the Tekken. It was said that if you found yourself overexcited, to come back to balance, you are to stand on the eastern side of the Tekken for 20 minutes. And if you wanted to get energy, stand on the western side. Today there's mad stolen Tekkenu all over the world, including one in Paris at the Vatican where the Pope speaks every Easter Sunday. Notice the arrogance. They put a Christian cross above this one. The most popular today is the replica that stands erect in Washington, D.C., that being the Washington Monument. More on that later. Central Park's stolen Tekken has inscriptions about Thutmose III down the center of each of the four faces. On either side of those inscriptions, Ramesses II added his own inscriptions. It weighs about 220 tons and is about 70 feet tall and about 6 feet wide, made out of red granite. Because of the harsh New York weather, only two sides are still readable. This is one of 9 Tekkenu that was erected by Thutmose III. Originally built as the pair for the Temple of the Sun at Heliopolis around 461 BC. In about 13 BC, Augustus Caesar had them moved to the water entrance of Caesareum at Alexandria. One of them fell over during an earthquake in 1301. It remained on its side until it was moved to London in 1877. Coincidentally, the Temple of Dendur, an ancient Kemetic monument, was installed at the Metropolitan Museum in 1978, just 300 meters from the Tekken, so there's actually 2 authentic ancient Kemetic monuments in Central Park. The story of the Central Park Tekken began in 1869. The ruler of Egypt offered it to the United States in appreciation for the aid of the construction of the Suez Canal. At first, the U.S. didn't want it. When they found out the other Tekken was offered to London, they suddenly got interested. In 1879, they began the move. Railroad magnate and Freemason William Henry Vanderbilt contributed over $100,000 to finance the project. Henry Honeychurch Gorringe, a Freemason and lieutenant commander of the U.S. Navy, was appointed the task of transporting the Tekken and its pedestal to New York, which arrived July 20, 1880. Its 50-ton base had to be moved first from its vertical stance to a horizontal position, and then lifted into a ship to be carried across the Mediterranean Sea, and then over the Atlantic Ocean. As the Tekken traveled through Manhattan on a special railroad track, it took 32 horses hitched in 16 pairs to drag the Tekken to its current resting place. On January 5, 1881, the 112th day, the Tekken arrived at the site. At its base are 4 900-pound 19th century bronze replicas of crabs, which were first placed there by the Romans. On October 10, 1880, the Tekken was inaugurated by the Grand Master of the Masons in the state of New York, with 9,000 Masons and 30,000 other spectators witnessing the ceremonies. Their official opening ceremony was then held on February 22, 1881, before a crowd of more than 10,000. What's interesting to know is that Freemasons are probably the only white-based organization who upholds the highest regard to our legacy, although you couldn't get them to tell you that unless they know you knew a thing or two about your history. More on that in another video article. Throughout all of these injustices, there have been no movements whatsoever by our alleged leaders and historians in the U.S. to have these stolen artifacts returned. Africa is still not free, nor are her descendants. Just this past April 2005, a Tekken was returned to Ethiopia. We should all be aware of it and begin a mass move to have each and every relic stolen by Whitey returned to its rightful place, Mama Africa. In 2002, Italy agreed to return an over 2,500-year-old, 200-ton, 78-foot Tekken called the Obelisk of Axum, which stood in downtown Rome for some 70 years. The Tekken served as a constant reminder of one of the 20th century's most vicious war crimes as Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, putting under his rule from 1935 to 1941, and introducing the first use of an aerial assault using poison gas on civilians and soldiers. It must also be noted that Mussolini, like Napoleon, who in 1899 came to Kemet and saw the African features of Haremakhet, saw that Kemet was as, if not more civilized, than the land he came from. Mussolini went on what he considered a mission to civilize darkest Africa, only to find evidence of a civilization that thrived before the period of the Roman Empire. Italy had agreed to give back what Mussolini took from Ethiopia in the 1930s, but intentions don't always match actions. It took over 70 years for it to be returned, and although they returned the Tekken, they still have not returned two other major things, one being Ethiopia's national archives and the other is Emperor Haile Selassie's pre-war airplane. But it shouldn't end there, Africans. Why should we be satisfied with the return of just one Tekken? See, technically, the US, Europe, and any other parties who are in possession of African works of art should be brought up on charges of stealing and/or receiving stolen goods. Instead of beefing over reparations from Whitey here in America, there should be a global reparations movement from all Euro nations, including other nations who profited from the theft and murder of African people and our culture. Whether this will be done resides not on our self-appointed leaders, but on you and me.